This is the Camp Iron Mountain Podcast, a place to learn about U.S. military history as told through the stories of service members, military units, and supporting civilians. Join us as we work to preserve their memories for future generations. Welcome back to the Camp Iron Mountain Podcast. I'm your host, Gabriel Suarez. It's great to have a good guest here, an old friend I made my last deployment, and he's our first Marine on the show. So for some of you who've been complaining, it's been an all Army show. I've been trying to branch out to the other branches, and he's going to be my first one. So I'm glad to welcome to the show my good buddy John Bruzza. Hey John, what's going on?
Hey Gabe, thanks for having me on. It's kind of exciting for me to be here with you.
Yeah, no, it's been a while. Like I said, we stay in touch on Facebook and other things, razzing each other here or there, but it's good to talk to you in person. So most guests I start with is just the early parts of your service, starting with kind of where you're born, where you grew up, and what were your influences to join the Marine Corps?
I was born in Evanston, Illinois, and then my parents moved against my objections as a 2-year-old to Portage, Michigan, which is where I grew up. Went through all my schooling there up through high school, and from there I ended up on the path to join a service academy. When I was in 7th grade, my uncle had given me Barron's College Guide, just to kind of get interested in so I could start.
You mean it was an actual book back in the day, right?
Yeah, a real
the real
book.
Thick.
Yeah, very thick. My uncle was a Georgia Tech graduate, and he wrote in the margins making fun of the University of Georgia. And at the time, I was really interested in going into engineering, even in 7th grade. But then I'd kind of flopped open the book, and it opened up to the page to the U.S. Air Force Academy Chapel. Mm-hmm. And from there, I don't know what happened. I was completely hooked into the idea of going into military service. I came from a family with a good background in military. My grandfather was in World War II with the Army Air Corps in China. Mm-hmm. My father was in the reserves. So we had a very strong association with the military. And I ended up, after years of work and effort, ending up at the Naval Academy. Ironically, when I started there, because I'd always wanted to fly, I was told I couldn't fly. And then I was working through the years there, and when we went in for our pre-commissioning physicals before the start of our junior year, they told me I could fly, which was the biggest shock of my life, which I was super excited about. I was moving forward, and then with my class, which was the class in 1997, at the end of your first semester of your senior year, you put in your choices for what services you wanted.
Okay.
And then they would board you in January, and then they would tell you where you end up going, whether you're surface Navy, Navy Air, Marine Corps, Marine Air, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Well, I came back from the winter holiday, and to check into my deferral on my package with the Pensacola Medical, and I was shown that my waiver was declined. And I was kind of despondent at the time because at that point I'd been training exclusively for Navy Air. I sat down in the hallway and at Bancroft Hall, which is where we all lived. And across the hall, there was a bulletin board, and it just had that small foil sticker with the Marine Corps on it. And I looked at that and I'm like, that's what I'm doing. I'd had some good influences from the Marine Corps in training. My coaches at the hockey team were Marine officers. My midshipman job was with a Marine gunnery sergeant, and that's where I decided to go into the Marine Corps. So I was kind of a shock to everybody, but it turned out to be the best choice because that's really where I think I had the best life of the military. What was being part of the Marine Corps.
Were you able to change that late in your selections, or?
Luckily, my grade point average was good enough that helped tremendously. And then I had the support from the Marines on the yard because they understood where I was coming from. Again, working closely with those individuals. I found out later on that the gunnery sergeant I worked with my midshipman job went to the Master Chief at the hospital to make sure my pre-commissioning Marine Corps physical went through. So I had a lot of help getting that.
Hmm.
But again, my having good grades up to that point helped tremendously with the switch that I hadn't done any of the Marine preparatory training.
Yeah, that's what I try to tell my kids nowadays. They don't want to hear it. It's like, hey, you might not want to go somewhere right now, but if you do good enough in your grades, life changes and it gives you options later on.
Right, right.
All right. So you commissioned from the Naval Academy and you got to go to the Marine Corps. From what I understand, can you talk about the additional processes that all Marine Corps officers have to go through? Because it's not simply, hey, just showing up and getting whatever branch you were in and then moving on. Everyone has to kind of do a common officer training, correct?
Right. Well, to become a second lieutenant, you can either go through the Naval Academy or OCS direct, or through the ROTC accessions. So, all getting to the commissioning, it's a couple different paths, but then every officer, regardless of what branch you're going to be in, which the Marine Corps is just the MOS instead of the branch.
Mm-hmm.
um, you all go to the basic school in Quantico, where we spend 9 months learning how to be infantry officers to fight, with the premise that every Marine a rifleman and every Marine officer is a rifle platoon commander.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't matter whether there was judge advocates, pilot accessions. I went in as a ground unrestricted, so any ground MOS was open to me when I started at the basic school, but we all went through that training, and you work all the way up through company level infantry tactics at the basic school.
Did you find out what your job would be in the Marines after the basic school or after you graduated from Annapolis?
During the basic school as a ground officer, I was ground unrestricted MOS.
Okay.
In my class at the basic school, there was 161 of us that were ground unrestricted, which meant similar thing that happened at the Naval Academy, where you went into put in your choices, and in the last third of the training, after you had a lot of your academic training, your military training, and your physical training scores, you would be given your trainee MOS was.
Mm-hmm.
So it was another accession process just to compete for whatever whatever MOS that you were trying to get to.
And what did you end up getting?
I ended up as a combat engineer officer, which was my first choice. My second choice was infantry. So I was always looking to go into combat arms or combat arms type MOS.
Mm-hmm.
So I was happy with that. That was an influence from my sophomore year at the Naval Academy, where one of my training officers was a engineer officer, and I liked. He was a great man that I really admired during the training, and that fed into my interest in becoming an engineer.
Okay. So how long was the your basic course?
Base course about 9 months, based on when you start, because of the
Okay.
holiday period and everything. Because it's a school, they shut down for the winter and everything for the Christmas holiday and stuff.
Okay. And then you transitioned to your combat engineer course. How long was that?
That was a 3 month course at the time. I think it's gotten a little bit longer since I went through, since I'm old. Um,
Did the Marines run their own, or do you kind of go through the Army course?
that one is a Marine specific
Okay.
school at Courthouse Bay at Camp Lejeune. We do the multi service on occasion. Most of the officer accession programs don't. They typically have at least a Marine portion first. Like I know the intelligence officers go. They do basic school, then they do infantry officers course, and then they go to Fort Huachuca for their intelligence training.
Yeah, I was similar when I was artillery officer. We had the Marines did their course with us.
Right. Yeah. That's one of the examples where we did do the multi-service training, and then there'd be Marine specific classes during the course of instruction, but it was a combined school.
So after you completed your all your initial training, did you go on active duty?
Yes. Yeah. I
Okay.
was.
I guess take us through your first couple of years on active duty. What kind of jobs, locations?
So I ended up. So out of the basic school, you can only select what uh, as your secondary selection after MOS is where do you want to be stationed first.
Uh-huh.
either Camp Lejeune, Camp Pendleton, Okinawa. There's very few Europe billets for us. It's pretty much those are the three choices. And I chose Camp Lejeune. I got my platoon commander, who is now an attorney. He stays in touch with us, but he was a big guy, a big proponent of Camp Lejeune because at the time in the late '90s, all the best deployments were coming out of Camp Lejeune because you're going
Mm-hmm.
into the Mediterranean theater and the European theater, and the West Coast was kind of the backup at the time.
Okay.
So I chose to go there and ended up with 8th Engineer Support Battalion. For your other Army heads, that's like a combat heavy engineering battalion. And I was a platoon commander there. Did my first deployment at the end of '99 to Haiti. We built schools because engineering battalions, we don't just break things, but we also build things.
Was that part of after any of the earthquakes or anything, or just a
No,
part of a deployment?
it was actually about a year before the first big earthquake,
Okay.
or a few years, and it was part of a large joint effort in Haiti. There was actually a JTF Haiti that was run from Southcom that did it was deployed for training for engineer units. That engineer units from the Air Force, Army, and the Marine Corps and the Seabees all came to build, build hospitals, build school complexes,
Mm-hmm.
and money from the State Department to help kind of build up some of the outlying areas of Haiti. So
Okay.
it was a nice opportunity. I was the second in command as a baby second lieutenant.
Hmm.
So I had my platoon and I was the nominal XO on a 50-man det, and we would go out and be on site for a week and come back for a night back to at our compound at the airport. And so it was a good introduction. From there, I came back and I was voluntold. I was interviewing to be the aide for the deputy for 2MEF, the Second Marine Expeditionary Force.
Mm-hmm.
And I went up to interview, and the general liked me. I think because he said, "Do you want this job?" I said, "Sir, not really," because I was slated to deploy with 26 MU as the engineering detachment commander if I didn't get that job.
Yeah.
So, and I think because I was honest and told him I didn't want it, yeah, I think he decided that'd be fun to grab me. It was a great experience though, and he was an excellent general to work for and to learn from. He didn't need a lot of the care and feeding when you hear some of the horror stories
Mm-hmm.
of people that feel entitled. He was very independent. And he told me early on, and something that I kept through is my job was make sure he's at the right place in the right time in the right uniform. And I was his walking phone book.
Yeah.
So that, and then he hated staples. So to this day, I still hate staples.
That's when again, like you said, you're old. You actually probably had a phone book you carried around with
Oh
you
yeah,
everywhere.
I had the book and the old cell phone brick and everything. So that was a great experience for a year. I got exposed to a lot of great parts of the Marine Corps because as the deputy for 2MEF, he's actually the green side certifier of the MU process to certify each MU as SOC capable. So
Sorry to cut you off real quick.
uh,
Can you, I guess, for those uninitiated, can you kind of a brief explanation of how the Marines are organized and what you mean by the MU?
oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, no
So
problem.
basically, if you take Camp Lejeune, Camp Pendleton, and Okinawa, they comprise 1, 2, and 3 MEF. Camp Lejeune is 2 MEF, Second Marine Expeditionary Force. That's a division, an air wing, and then an associated at the time a Force Service Support Group. Now it's a Marine Logistics Group. And then the subordinate units from there, just like everything else in the Marine Corps, it's modular, usually following the rule of three, that you have a Marine Expeditionary Brigade. There's only one MEB because it's taken as a command unit, but it takes a full one of the regiments of infantry, an air group, and then associated size group from the support units. And then there's the MUs. There's 7 standing MUs in the Marine Corps. There's 3 out of Camp Lejeune, 3 out of Camp Pendleton, and 1 out of Okinawa. So you have 22nd, 24th, and 26th MU out of Camp Lejeune. And that's a reinforced infantry battalion as a battalion landing team, a reinforced aviation squadron with rotary and fixed wing assets, and then a combat logistics battalion to support. And it's a self-sustaining unit for 15 days. And then it floats on 3 ships provided by the Navy, which is the ARG, the Amphibious Readiness Group. So those components work together to be the forward deployed presence of the Marine Corps as kind of like the quick reaction force for our strategic objectives.
All right. So did you get to travel a lot with when you were the general's aide or
Yep.
go on deployments?
Well, not on
Not
deployments.
but just kind of go around the battle space.
Yeah, we again, this is pre 9/11. So our travel mostly comprised us going to visit 4 different MUs as they went through the training cycles, 22nd twice, 24th and 26th once each, and watch all the training events and go through the briefings with the G7, our simulations group in the MEF headquarters. And so I got to see behind the scenes a lot of things a much higher level than a first lieutenant normally would see. So it was really an interesting experience because my general let me sit on anything I could sit in on to help me learn and grow as an officer. So that he was really intent on making sure that I had a good growth experience too, having to sit with him and be his wingman the whole time.
That's good. I guess continue. What did you do after that?
So from there, I ended up with being assigned to U.S. Central Command, the Joint Security Directorate Forward, which was in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And from there, we were part of the Joint Security Directorate at the time had a anti-terrorism force protection assessment team, and I was the engineer on the team. So I would help assist on evaluating structures and barrier systems of bases throughout the Central Command theater, the peninsula. It touched every country at the time except for getting into Iraq at the time as pre 9/11, but visited every country on the peninsula. We spent some time in Egypt and getting around and assessing everything. And unfortunately, that was the time of the USS Cole when the
bombing.
Cole was attacked. So I didn't make the cut to go down to Yemen at the time. I was the last person left on the team just because of size constraints to go down there to make the port assessments and the security assessments. But that was kind of my first real introduction to that kind of what was going on in the world at the time. So I get to see again some of the inside of what was going on when that happened. And so I spent a year there, and then from there I got assigned to be the instructor for Charlie Company, 6th Engineer Support Battalion, which is a reserve unit. The I&I is the active duty component of the Marine Corps Reserve. So I had my small active duty staff that we would run the company when the reservists weren't there. Make sure the maintenance was being done, admin was being taken care of, inventory, all the things that happen, the administrative stuff to support when we would get ready for drill weekends and the annual training every year.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of the job I had. My last job over here in Northern California. I did that same thing, except on the Army side.
Right. Yeah. And so I spent 3 years there. And my oldest child was born, and it was about 2004. And at that point, I thought my best path was to actually get out and try the civilian world. And that lasted about 7 months, and then I was begging to come back in. So I was with the Reserve Artillery Battery in Richmond, Virginia, only there for about 9 months, and then I got remobilized and went back to 8th Engineer Support Battalion as a captain. And from there, I had 2 deployments going back to 8th Engineers. One as the Assistant Operations Officer, and then my second deployment, I was company commander for Bridge Company in Iraq. And that was probably one of the most gratifying experiences as a Marine, being in a Marine unit, is actually being able to command troops in a combat environment. We never were in any active combat when we were there, but we did go into Fallujah in some of the aftermath of the Battle of Fallujah and help build observation posts and FOBs for units, either Army units. We worked with the 7th Cav for a little bit. I built a FOB for one of their troops, and then we would do reinforcements of joint units and for people doing security around the southern part of Fallujah.
And this was in 2003 or
No,
2004
that deployment was in 2006,
and six. Okay.
and then from there I went to Fort Leonard Wood, where I was the company commander for the Engineer Equipment Instruction Company. Kind of going back to what you were talking about with joint training, being on the Army base, we made use of the multi-service training for all of our equipment operators, surveyors, and mechanics. So all of our basics went through there as a combined course, and that's where our junior NCO and then our staff NCO, the chief's course, and our warrant officer programs were based out of Fort Leonard Wood.
Okay.
And then from there, I got out again. This was more of a personal issue to try to on my for family health of family. Got out again, and I ended up with my job in Arizona, where I worked for a solar power company building solar power plants.
And what year was that you got off active duty?
2009
Okay.
when I got out, and then I was remobilized in 2011 to go back east to work for a program called Marine for Life. The Marine for Life is one of our, in the Marine Corps, it's one of the transitional programs to help connect Marines and sailors who work with Marines with opportunities with employment, education, and mentorship. And I got to be on active duty for 2 years to kind of help at both Parris Island and Beaufort, South Carolina. I worked at both those bases are within 20 minutes of each other. So I worked at both bases and the transition offices there and really worked in the transition system and helped Marines that are transitioning out into civilian life and connect them up with those type of opportunities.
Seems like a pretty satisfying job.
It's satisfying from the fact that I got to interact with a lot of Marines. They gave me actually a wedge of instruction at the corporal's course that they're running at the air station in Beaufort. So I got to interact with a lot of people, a lot of Marines, and make a lot of connections. And then in 2013, demobilized from that, went back, and I became the operations officer for Marine Wing Sports Squadron 471 as a reservist. Those are that's the engineering unit, nominal engineering unit in the air wing for the Marine Corps.
Okay.
So that was up in Minneapolis. So that was as a reservist, but I would stay engaged. Any extra drill time I would pick up so I could go to Minneapolis and work with my 3 staff to do prepare the unit for deployment or annual trainings or that kind of stuff. Did that for a few years, and then I got picked up for where we met, which was the working for, at the time, it wasn't C Jock J, it was the previous incarnation of it when you guys were still there. And then I showed up right when we were transitioning over to be the Combined Joint Operations Center Jordan, and then working in the 5 shop with you and the crew that we had there.
Yeah, that was a good crew.
Yeah, it was interesting.
It was, but I mean, that's part of, I guess, military life. You never know. Every job you get, even if you stay in the same job, every new cycle, when you lose people, gain people, it's a new adventure, meeting all different types of people and getting to work with them.
Yeah, and I'd been in the joint environment before, so I was kind of familiar with it. Because of my career path, I never ended up going to the intermediate level school as an in resident to really be exposed to some of the joint type credits. But having been in CENTCOM previously as a young company grade, I had some ideas of it, and I'd done my regular. I did do the command and staff college through the distance learning portion, so I knew nominally how it was, but working with all the different joint services in the different countries there was really a great experience at that point.
Yeah, I guess that brought you up to about 20 years, and you retired soon after that.
Yeah. I had I got to my terminal velocity in the Marine Corps, and in June of 2017, it was June 1st. That was 20 years and 8 days of time in service, and then retired out of the squadron up in Minneapolis. And it was fun kind of talking with the Marines that were there, because two of the four companies that are in the MWSS were actually based in Minneapolis, so a decent amount of people were there, and got to say, find out, there's a handful of those Marines that weren't even born when I started in the Marine Corps. So it was kind of seeing that whole, the cycle of life, that it helped me mentally with time to move on, with realizing that, that everybody thinks that they're the one that keeps everything standing, but the Marine Corps and, any service will go on without us because
Hmm.
we train, we're consistently training our replacements.
Yes. I guess looking back, what did you enjoy most about life in the military?
My favorite part about being in the military was just being a Marine, and everything that means to, all the services have their own sense of camaraderie, and probably I'm a little bit, you know, myopic when I look at it. I feel like the Marines take care of ourselves more than, our sense of identity is tied to being a Marine. I feel more than being, like your identity as being a soldier, that you're more tied to your units or your
Hmm.
branches than you are to just being a soldier. Obviously everybody's proud of being a soldier, sailor, airman, but Marines are Marines. And, we have our stereotypes, and sometimes we like to live up to our stereotypes, but, we're all part of the same military family, of course. But, just being a Marine was the best, and being around the Marines and helping teach and influence. And when you get to hear that little snippet, I mean, my first deployment to Iraq, I remember we were getting ready to turn over to 9th Engineer Sport Battalion. They were out of Okinawa, and one of the lieutenants was a guy that was a sergeant in my deployment to Haiti.
Hmm.
And I got to tell him he made it into the officer accession program when we were in Haiti. And this guy was like, it looked like he was carved out of marble. I mean, like ideal Marine.
Like your
Um,
recruitment poster
yeah.
Marine.
And we're talking or eating at the chow hall, and he's like, "Sir, I just want to tell you, I really appreciated your time with me." And I was only with him for about 5 months.
Hmm.
And stuff that you said, and I tried to model my leadership style after you. And it was like, I'm trying to play it cool, but inside I'm like, holy crap. This guy that I thought was, that's like he was the top sergeant in a battalion of like 1,300 Marines. And it just blew me away that I had that kind of influence, because I just try to treat people with respect and push them and to be the best that they can be. So
Hmm.
that was one of those times where it just you really feel that.
I know that you kind of shared that when we did your farewell in Jordan. You're pretty emotional on the opportunities of the continued service and just serving with others and having a small part in working with, I guess, the future generation. So I always remember that part of our deployment.
Yeah, that was probably one of the single most memorable things was, and it sounds weird, especially to somebody who's not been deployed or not been involved in the military, of what was done for me on that farewell was probably one of the most honored. I mean, it's worth more than anything that anybody's ever pinned to my chest.
Hmm.
And for nobody, nobody was there. Basically, our ops sergeant major arranged to have all three shifts of our battle staff, because at the time I switched from our Jeep. Remember, I went
Yeah.
from our plans department. I became the current operations officer, so I ran the operations center. So all three shifts of the battle staff and the crews that were staffing all the stations in there. Basically, the ops sergeant major arranged it for all three of my shifts, which was the battle captain, the battle NCO, and the clerks. So 9 guys, the intel staff, and God knows how many other people were there. It just was overwhelmingly. I couldn't have a better honor than what. And I know you had a hand in it too, Gabe, but and I always appreciated that. But just what you and the sergeant major and everybody did for me for that meant more than
That's
anything that anybody's put on my chest.
Now that for me that was most fun. I was almost basically the section social coordinator. So I was like, "How do you guys want to go out? All right, you want to do that? I can make it happen. Hold on." Yeah, no, that was great. Not just for you, but for the rest of the ops section, because they always worked, and because operations were always going on, they rarely got a chance to go out and do any of the cultural stuff that some of us were able to do. And yeah, I was just glad that they were able to. Majority of them were all able to make it out to that as well. Going back to reflecting on the career you had, you kind of talked about the CG you got to serve with as his aide early on as a lieutenant. Thinking back, any other one or two soldiers or NCOs, leaders that you served with that stand out as having a really lasting influence on your life?
Yeah, my first platoon sergeant at the time, Staff Sergeant Willie Drains, he ended up retiring as a first sergeant, just helping grow a baby lieutenant, and he had a great hand in shaping my growth in the actual Marine Corps. No longer in school and the theoretical leadership stuff,
Hmm.
the real deal issues with Marines every day, living in the barracks, how to deal and grow the platoon. I couldn't have asked for a better platoon sergeant and a guy to grow. He didn't have a huge ego. We shared, again, this is late 90s, so the Marine Corps we never have had a lot of money.
Hmm.
Our company office, my platoon office was an old broom closet. The linoleum stopped at our door. And they stuffed the two desks for me and him in there as our platoon office.
You're a big guy too, so I can only
He
imagine how cramped it was.
Yeah, he was 6'2" also. He's bigger than me. So so we yeah, that was, the Staff Sergeant Drains was great, and just one of the real formative influences in how how I grew and how I acted. Another one was my battalion commander, my first deployment, Lieutenant at the time, Lieutenant Colonel Dan Elzey. He retired as a colonel, and if I would have made the cut and been able to get promoted to lieutenant colonel, he was going to back me up for battalion command also,
Hmm.
to try to get to battalion command. So I just great guy, great leader, uh, great guy, a visionary, and how combat engineering was evolving, in the early 2000s, acquiring the route clearance technologies and the organization to be able to support that effort. He was instrumental in that, I think, in the Marine Corps in general.
Okay. All right. I guess, as we start to kind of wind down our talk here, a little bit more of the funner things. For those who've never served in the military, I guess, or the Marine Corps, I offer, which of the many stereotypes about Marines would you say is blatantly untrue? And then second part of that, what is your favorite crayon?
Well,
So,
first, the fact that we eat crayons is just a fallacy, but no, the Marine Corps, um, by doctrine, and we share a lot of the doctrine with the Army, just emphasizing the small unit leadership. I mean, our corporals, they get carried a tremendous weight on their shoulders of both technology, tactical, and even operational, and sometimes even strategic level importance. They are tremendously intelligent individuals.
hmm.
Um, they make they we so that whole aspect of the Marines being you know chest thumping crayon eaters. It's a fun stereotype. We play into it, but for sure, just the intelligence level that some of these young men and women have is astonishing when you step back and you look at it.
Okay. All right. So you failed number two. What is your second favorite?
Oh,
Or
green,
your
of
favorite
course. Yeah.
crayon color? Okay.
Or
All
the
right.
or like a scarlet and gold, if it's like one of those mixed crayons when it's melted. It's been sitting on the dashboard of the Humvee for a while.
All right. Now, I guess as we finish up, I mean, tell me who's winning the World Series this year?
Uh, yeah, well, not the Cubs because
I mean, are
they
you ready for another Cubs rebuild? And I guess, do you
well,
think
it's
they'll make it back in your lifetime?
no. I don't trust in that at all. I'll be an old crusty dude at the home, but at least I'll be able to say I saw it. Um, the the White Sox are exciting. And right now, what I look for in teams is the ones that are the most fun and exciting. Even like your A's.
Hmm.
Um, you know, everybody's playing either home run or strikeout. Where the teams that play the small ball, and again, showing my age with being crusty and get off my lawn stuff. Because it's just action. It's fun to watch, see stolen bases, singles and doubles,
Yeah.
bunts, and you got guys like it's kind of a, I shouldn't be rooting for the White Sox as a Cub fan, but guys like Tim Anderson that just seem to
can't get them out.
But they play and then they talk they speak their minds, or guys like, and this is where I'll break from the tradition. The guys like Fernando Tatis Jr., the ones that really flamboyant, where in the in the 80s they would get drilled every time, but now let them have some excitement and be fun. The game's supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to be just business. So I think the White Sox are in a prime position. I don't know if anybody in the National League is really stepping up to it to really be, but you never know once you get into October and the playoff season. Somebody could just catch fire.
Yeah, you never know. All right, man. Are there any other topics you wanted to bring up that we didn't cover?
No, I think we went through all the military stuff, and going into my retirement, I've picked up a couple hobbies of painting tiny things now, and so I try to with that, as I learn how to think, because like Larry K-Fish told us, Google is your friend. Google and YouTube. Yeah, Google has taught me a lot of things about doing it, and it's gotten me into paying attention more to small content creators. Yourself in that vein with this podcast, that supporting that is the new version of supporting the local economy.
Yeah.
You could still support the local economy, but paying attention to those content creators and making sure that you support them. And it's kind of helped me get over some, get through some other rough patches in my personal life, just with that, and branching out and meeting new people. So that's kind of a neat thing.
Yeah. Well, no, man, I appreciate it for taking the time to join me. It's been fun catching up, and then one of these days I'll get out to Arizona. I'm kind of bummed I didn't get a chance to get out there when I was closer in El Paso, but I'll make my way down there at some point.
Oh, yeah, the A's training facility is just up the street from my work.
Oh, definitely. Now that I'm coming up on retirement, that was probably the most fun I had, or we in a family had in a long time, was going out to spring training. It really is just a great atmosphere and just overall fun.
Yeah.
So all right, brother, I will talk to you soon, and thanks again for joining me.
All right, thanks, Gabe. Appreciate it.
All right, goodbye. If you enjoy listening to our show, please take a few moments to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast player. This simple step is the best way for you to help new listeners find the show. Join us next time as we continue to share stories from America's military past.